Welcome to Inspire Me with Jay. This is a podcast to inspire, uplift, show forth the love of God, and help usher in the spiritual awakening. Welcome to Inspire Me with Jay. I'm your host, Jay Spillers, author and teacher. I have a guest today, Gabi Garland. Gabi, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Gabi Garland. I am a mom of two people. One is a grown up. She is almost 24, and I have a little boy with my husband who will be 5 in March. I own an agency that is technically two companies, Resilient Heart Agency and Resilient Voice Media. And everything that I do is one, to either help women heal and amplify their voice. And the other part is to take your podcast from a random idea all the way to a live full production with monetization, with my whole entire editing and processing and editors and the whole team. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
So, you have your own podcast?
I do. It's called the Resilient Heart Podcast.
And how many listeners do you have?
It's about 2,600 listeners on average per episode. So we stay pretty popular. We went on launch weekend. We actually launched at 111 on Apple Podcasts, which I share all the time, just because I think too often we think that we don't have enough people on social media to have a powerful message. And I had a little over 1,000 people across all my social media platforms, and so getting to have that type of success right out the gate is part of why I love social media, and it's part of why I love making new connections and getting to know people, because I feel like too many of us think we don't have enough people to build something successful, and I am proof that that is not true.
So, is there like certain tricks you did to get your podcast up and growing?
There was a couple different things. So I had an agency at the time that actually did the editing portion. What I really did is I went really hard I didn't have a business at the time. So I really sat down. My background is in sales and marketing management, business development. And so I really sat down and mapped out a launch plan of, how am I going to get enough eyes on this? How am I going to get people to be excited to listen to this? And what I did is I laid out a launch that was pretty substantial. I launched with, I believe it was 8 episodes, and they were all different topics. And so the thing that I wanted to do, and the thing that I understood without even really being in the podcast world prior to that, was that I needed to understand my audience even further. And so I gave a breadth of kind of a range of different information and different podcast episodes, so that I could get an idea of what my listeners were going to be wanting more of. And then I took those metrics and really sat down and mapped out things that were in alignment for me, because I never want to have episodes that don't make sense, that aren't in a reflection of who I am or the work that I do or just me as a person. And that's just pretty much kind of the strategy we've rocked with. I haven't done a whole ton of interviews on other people's podcasts, because I've been so busy interviewing for Resilient Heart and then launching podcasts for clients. But really, it was really building relationships on social media that I had done and fostered over the last 10 years on that particular profile, and really knowing my audience really well, and just really showing up and getting their support. And my podcast has been life-changing for me in so many facets. So it's been a really fun ride.
So, what motivated you to start a podcast?
To be honest with you, and I tell this story every time somebody asks me, is I actually had a friend that wanted to launch a podcast together, and her motivation was very different. Once we really sat down and looked at, like, here's what I want to do, here's what you want to do, they really weren't in alignment. And what I had to understand is, one, at the time I didn't have a business. I was doing some freelance work, consulting with corporations on business development and customer retention and some things like that. But I was a stay-at-home mom at that time, and I was crawling out of postpartum depression. And when I knew I didn't want to do a podcast with that friend, I was like, okay, well, I guess we're going to do one on my own. And what I really did is I sat down and thought about kind of the trajectory of my life. Like, how did I get to this woman that I am? And what are those steps that I taken? And I had started, I was in pretty rough postpartum depression when my launch happened. But one thing I didn't think that I realized would end up occurring was that my podcast, my connections, and then my path would, one, help me heal, and two, it would help connect me to the women that would end up being clients all these years later. And so it's just been this really wild, beautiful journey that I was like, I had no idea what I was getting into when I did it. But now I own an agency and I help other people do it. So it's like, you never know where life will take you.
Mm-hmm. So, like, what is the goal of your podcast? Because it's Resilient Heart. Isn't it something to do with recovering from childhood shame and trauma?
It is. So it's two parts. So I always tell people Resilient Heart at their core is all about resilient life. So my daughter is a product. I had her with her father, and it was a very tumultuous, horrific domestic violence relationship. And she has broken the mold, and she is now a police officer. She's a SWAT. She's training with SWAT. She was a firefighter, an EMT, first responder, and so the resilient piece resonates for her. And then my husband and I had our son shortly after we got married, and he had has a heart condition. So right out the gate, resilient heart is the story of my family. Really, it is what happens when life throws you the curveballs, the struggles, the things that inevitably happen to all of us in different facets, and then helping people and teaching them how you got on the other side of it. And some of it is the journey of all the different healing modalities I did, and then I got certified in them and do that within my coaching agency. And the other part is really giving people a space, women more specifically than men. I do have some men clients and guests, but it's mostly women. And it's really where you understand that women are told, you don't talk about those things, and it doesn't, we're supposed to be quiet, we're supposed to keep those things undercover. And there's such a healing component that comes that when you can hold space for somebody to be open about their life, to share about the things that they've gone through. And I think my favorite part of the podcast in general is all the messages that I get, not just from people that are listening, but from the loved ones of the people who are guests that are like, I did not know that about her. I have been friends with her for 25 years and she's never shared that with me. And watching it help them heal as well, to just get it out and just release that story from their life, from their heart. And it's just been so much fun.
Was part of it you give different strategies to help heal, like different therapies and modalities?
Yeah, so I'm certified in Reiki, hypnosis, and NLP with a pretty heavy certification background in the trauma component of it, because of the life that I've led, the things that I've gone through, from domestic violence to getting evicted, to food scarcity, to financial ruin from thyroid cancer. Like, I've really been through the ringer. And so when I sat down and looked at what I want my agency to look like, I wanted to see what modalities I felt like would be the most impactful for the women that I work with. And so I sat down and looked at all the things that had really been the framework for how I got from the girl that didn't believe in herself, the girl that struggled, the girl that couldn't pay her bills, the girl that got evicted, to the woman that can stand on a stage in front of thousands and thousands of people and be very confident and very happy. And so I kind of dug into all those modalities, got so many certifications, and then we just kind of went for it, is really what happened.
So do you do like therapy in addition to your podcasts, like hypnotherapies for people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hypnosis and trauma hypnosis. It was so interesting to me the first time I had a hypnosis session, what it unlocked for me about belief systems that I had carried my whole life. That sometimes we think the reason we do something, or the reason we are the way that we are, is because of this thing, this big, huge, massive life shift moment, like somebody died, or a significant other passed away, or some really life altering moment. And what I found is that so many of the moments that changed your belief system and made you move in a way that was different was really sometimes just a really small, crappy comment that someone said to you that shifted your mindset in the way that you feel about yourself and the belief system that you carry. and being able to, one, help myself get out of those spaces, and two, help women do that, watching them soar, watching them heal, watching them grow, is it's just, it's everything. It really, it's my favorite part.
Please like, subscribe to this channel, and share everywhere. Thank you. And how many episodes of your podcast do you have now?
There's got to be like 125, 130. I've had a couple of hiatuses. I'm on a hiatus right now. It might be a little bit more than that. It's somewhere around in that range, 120, maybe 130. Yeah, so we've been around for a minute. It'll be 4 years in August.
Well, I mean, did you shoot for a goal of like twice a month or something then?
It's usually actually a podcast that is weekly. But I've just had a lot going on from traveling and moving, and then client launches and some different things. And so sometimes my podcast goes on the wayside so that I can show up for my clients. And that doesn't bother me anymore. It used to be like, oh my goodness, what am I doing? And why haven't I had my podcast? But I have tons of episodes. And for me, it's putting out the right content when I know what my audience is looking for. And I'm really connected to all the women that whether I work with them or whether I'm just connected with them on social media. And so I know when it's time to drop certain episodes. And so there's some really good, powerful episodes that are coming here in the next couple of weeks. I'm excited for that.
So, I mean, you help other people with their podcast then? Is that the clients you primarily work with?
Yeah. Absolutely. So we do a couple of kind of a mishmash of things. So we have clients that come to us and they're like, I want to start a podcast. I don't know what I want to call it. I don't know who my audience is. I don't really have a business. I just know I want to do a podcast. And so I want to get some help in just fleshing that all out. So we go through from what the name of your podcast will be. I have designers on my team that will actually design graphic designers will do your design for your cover. We sit down and copyright together your intro and your outro. We have logins that you can log in and get non-copywritten music that can do for your intro and outro music. And then we literally sit down and I dig into, depending on which package you choose, dig into who is your avatar, who is the man or the woman that you're serving, who is your ideal audience, and is that an audience that you currently have attracted already, or is that an audience that we're needing to look at? How can I create content so that I can bring those people closer to me so that they're listening, so that I am connected to them? And really, it's just all strategy. It's how do I, one, bring them in, and two, how do I get them to stay, and how do I get them to love me and keep coming back and listening and sharing and being my client and buying my books and all of the different things that podcasts can bring for you. And that's really kind of what we do. And then we also have other clients that'll come on and they're like, I already have a whole social media team. They're doing my podcast, but I would like some help on the editing side. And so sometimes we can literally just cohesively work with a current client's team, and we do the edits, they do some of the pieces, and we just kind of collaborate together. And we have another opportunity, which has happened quite a few times over the last couple of years, is people that have a podcast that's maybe not performing. Like, you've got a really strong message, you feel like you know your audience pretty well, but it's like you're getting 12 downloads an episode, or maybe it's not growing at all, or you get 6 downloads. And podcasting is so much work. It's like producing a full-time TV show. And so that's really pretty devastating. We've had clients come to us, and we had one last year that had 58 downloads. I wish I should have written the numbers down, but it was like 58 downloads in quite a significant amount of time. And we went back in, relaunched it, rebranded it, give her a new cover, new intro, outro, just basically kind of gave it a little glow up. And the very first month, they had over 800 downloads that very first month, from 58 over like a 6 or 8 month period. So a lot of times I think people will just get it done and that they just throw it out there. And it's not that I think that there's anything wrong with that, because done, you can tweak done, you can make adjustments, you can make changes to done. You just have to get something out there. But a lot of times what happens is people will quit podcasting, even though they have a really powerful message, they have a really beautiful voice, they have a really big desire to serve and help and pour into a community, but their community is not listening to them. We can sit down and figure out why that is, and start tweaking your content and mapping it out in a way that can allow those people to come into your world, come into your client base and come become your listeners, your friends, your clients, your all of those components. So
Hmm. Well, it seems like most of the listeners I get is when I hit Facebook groups. Because it's like I put it on different
mm,
social media things like Twitter and LinkedIn and all that, but it seems like the groups is where I get most of the listeners when I hit the groups.
okay. I have actually never put my podcast in a group. Now that I think about it, that's a good place to do it. If that's working for you, I will absolutely try that. I've actually for myself. I know clients have done it, but I've never put Resilient Heart in a group. That's a that's a good idea. I will
Hmm.
do that, and then I will let you know how it goes for me.
Yeah. So, like, what are some of the most memorable guests you had on your podcast?
My most downloaded episode is actually my daughter and my episode, which was my very first episode. It was on the launch in August of 2020, and it was really because of my listenership is so many mamas. They're women that I've grown up with. They're women that I was in network marketing with. They're women that have been in my life for most of them, some up to 20, 30, 40 years. And mom life is something that is very talked about within my community, and that episode was still to this day probably 4 to 5 times the number of downloads of any other episode. And so that one will always be close to my heart just because that's a legacy episode for me. That's something that she can listen to. My great grandbabies can listen to, and she can look back and listen to her and her mom having a conversation about how we grew up together. That was a really powerful one. We've done some kind of heavy
Hmm.
topics. So we've done ones where we talked about pregnancy loss. We talked about postpartum depression. We've talked about or not sibling loss, spouse loss, when a spouse suddenly passes away. And so we've taken some really heavy topics, but we've also, because my guests are so just like these beautiful human beings that have just crawled from the rubble of what these situations have brought to their lives and have such a beautiful perspective. And so we don't leave you in the dumps crying. Like you probably go and cry on some episodes, but you're also going to laugh a lot because there is so much laughter to be found even in the really hard times. And so it's just really, it's fun. It's been so much fun.
Hmm. Well, like with you talking about domestic violence, most of the time, is there like cues that kind of, let you know that there might be a problem? Like maybe initially you're dating him and he's not hitting you, but maybe he's getting in your face and really yelling and screaming. Like maybe this could escalate. Is there like signs you can look for?
Absolutely. I'm going to I'll give you 3 examples. And a lot of time, I actually have an episode that one of the episodes I was just talking about that's going to be coming out on Resilient Heart is specifically to this is the, the before it all really went bad, how he groomed me to what felt like the crumbling of my self-esteem, my self-worthiness, and the before the abuse actually started. One of those things that he did was isolation. And when it talks about isolation, it doesn't mean he's like holding you captive in your home, though that has happened for people as well. It's the isolation of separating you from those of your loved ones. It's like, oh, but I miss you so much. I just want to talk to you. So don't go out with your girlfriends tonight, or don't go to your parents' house. Talk to me on the phone. And little me, because I was 18 years old when I met him, so I was a baby. I had no business being in this relationship, but I was he started that isolation process right away, and it was, don't go with your friends, I just want to be around you and I'll stay home too. And so it was this kind of pulling me away from my most closest friends and family. And that's one of those first markers of an abuser, is taking you from your current environment and starting to isolate you. The second one is the nitpicky stuff. So obviously, we're all not perfect human beings, but when you take somebody who will more than likely intentionally be an abuser at some point in your life, they start picking at different things about you, because those things that they pick at is those things that be like, one of the things he used to do is he's like, you're really pretty, but I don't like your nose. And so then I had this really horrible view of myself and my nose. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with my nose, like whatever. But he would always just kind of pick at different things. And so when I met him, I was very confident, very happy, had a successful job, was making great money working at AOL. Like I was checking all the boxes of like, I'm on a good path in my life. But then it was all these little comments. He's like, oh, then it would be like, oh, you are really pretty, but my ex-girlfriend was a Hawaii tropic model. And I know, you're not on that level and stuff like that. Right. So then you just start kind of dimming your light more and more and more. And then it's just kind of the unraveling from there. And then another thing that I think happens a lot before it really ever gets abusive is just controlling what you do. So when I think about those early years and my first kind of experience when I first moved in with him, um, everything had to run through him. Like we weren't married, we weren't engaged at the time, but when I got paid, he would take my paycheck and it was like, oh, well, you're young, so I'll deposit it in our account and I'll make sure everything gets taken care of. He wasn't working. So I was working, he wasn't working, and he was taking my money and he would spend it and he would not be a provider for me. And so then it took away my ability to be able to take care of myself because I didn't even have access to the money that I was earning because he was taking that access away from me. And in my mind, I'm like, we're together. We love each other. It's okay. And then I realized like that was kind of the start of the end of me having any access over to any of those components. And then it just got worse from there. And the incident, the first domestic violence, like physically harming me, came over an argument about a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So it wasn't even anything big that I did. I didn't cut the crust off of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And he literally picked me up by my neck and held me as I was starting to become unconscious. And he put me down. And it was because I didn't cut the sandwich crust off of his sandwich. And I stayed, or I left and I stayed and I went back. So, yeah.
Have you ever wanted to learn to meditate? Check out my book, Meditation for Everyone: How to Quickly Have a More Peaceful, Mindful, and Fulfilled Life, and support this channel. With Meditation for Everyone, you will learn to quickly and easily meditate, relieve stress and anxiety, alleviate depression, and have more joy, peace, and relaxation. What you will learn: mindfulness, the art of stillness, step by step on how to meditate, strategies for overcoming challenges to meditation, and much more. D. Mason said this is a nice meditation book, even for those already meditating. I agree with the statements that it will help to have a more peaceful, mindful, and fulfilled life. 4.6-star rating, available on Amazon. Well, I mean, how often is alcohol and drugs in the mix that's maybe contributing to domestic violence?
Oh, I definitely think that's a big, huge component. From a escalating. One of the things that I've learned about trauma, and I've learned about the way when we have wounds within us, the way that we soothe those wounds, a lot of times comes drugs and alcohol, sex, all sorts of gambling, all these different types of addiction type of behaviors. And I think he was definitely had a substance abuse issue. His substance abuse issue turned into my substance abuse issue, because when you are dealing with somebody who is treating you so awfully, you find ways to cope. And sometimes it's disassociation. And for me, my disassociation was drinking. It was like, if I have too much to drink and I fall asleep, then he's not going to mess with me because I'm asleep, and then I don't have to worry about it. And I think that happens. There's actually not one client or friend that has been through a domestic violence relationship that turning to drugs or alcohol was not a component for them in some capacity.
Well, I mean, it's at some point do that you had to come to a realization that, what's going on is not right, and you step out, you maybe get a protective order and go from there or something?
In my particular situation, I didn't get a protective order. I became pregnant with my daughter. He was very much getting, the abuse was escalating at that point. And I actually left him at 9 months pregnant. I basically put all of our belongings in black trash bags. And when he left to go hang out with his friends that day, I had called my dad and he flew in and picked me up and drove me home from Florida to New Mexico. Um, and I had my daughter just a couple of days later. And I think for women, when it comes to domestic violence or when it comes to leaving an abusive relationship, marriage, or any type of capacity that's unhealthy, so often women stay longer because they think I'm going to leave with nothing. And I think for me, in that moment, I was like, if I leave with my life and my baby's life, that's enough. And I'll figure it all out. I have family that loves me, that'll, I'm not going to be on the street, which, sometimes that's a thing. But I think when you want to live and you want to have a life, more importantly than you want to leave with things, then you're going to save your own life, and you're going to be your own surrender.
Hmm. Well, in his case, was he usually apologetic after it happened and saying it'd never happen again, or?
Yeah, like we went to anger management together. He went to anger management by himself. He went to therapy by himself. There was definitely like it's a pattern of behavior that it's, I'm abusive to you, and then I apologize, and then I tell you how much I love you, and I apologize, and I promise it'll never happen again. And so it was really this cycle for from I met him at 18 and he passed away at 25, and it was that cycle for all those years. But it was games, it was manipulation, it was just anything he could do to control me, to keep me not separate from him, so that I was as close to him as possible.
Hmm. Huh. So he passed away when you were 25?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my daughter was 4 when he passed away, so it's literally just been us. She'll be 24 in June.
Huh.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even if he was a little bit older, he probably wasn't really that old when he passed.
No, he was 30. He was a little bit older than me, but he was only 30. He was killed in a motorcycle accident.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow, because I mean, it probably, even though with everything that happened, it was probably still pretty traumatic, and then your
It
daughter
was.
lost your father, and
It was a blessing for us as far as peace was concerned, because he was pretty awful towards the end. We were actually, oddly enough, getting along before he died, which was layers of therapy and healing to figure out all my emotions around grief and trauma and guilt. Because there were some times when I really would pray, like, God, please, just can you just take him? Like, I just want peace. Like, I don't want this life. I don't want to fight with him. I don't want her to be unsafe. I don't want any of this. This is hell. And then when he died, I felt like, what kind of, like I caused it, which I know I didn't. But I was 25. I had no idea. I was very much not much of an adult. I was pretty immature emotionally, and just kind of in general. And so I really didn't have the skills or the processing ability to understand that at that time this was a gift. Um, and the peace has been a blessing. It really has.
hmm. And you met someone else since then.
Yeah, I'm married now. We've been together almost 10 years. So I was single for quite a while after he passed away. And then a pretty, I was not a very great girlfriend for a couple of years while I was trying to figure out. One thing that I think a lot of people forget is, yeah, you're okay because you're out of it, but there's so much ingraining and so much damage that's done to beliefs and what you think a successful or a happy or a cohesive relationship looks like. And I was bred in dysfunction from 18 to 25, and so I was pretty toxic as a woman, as a girlfriend, as a human for quite a few years, getting a lot of fights, drinking a lot, making bad decisions, spending money in ways that were not helpful for me. And it was really, I carried a lot of shame for the messiness that I was for those years, until I understood it was really all I knew to cope, because I wasn't given the skills in my current environment. And I was still trying to figure out how to get past those pieces, and those ways that I was in the world was all I knew how to just survive, was really just being in survival mode for a really long time, unfortunately.
So, what helped heal you personally? What does it hypnotherapy and some of the things that you're you're helping others with right now?
Yeah, so therapy, I always tell people, and I give this disclaimer every time I talk to anybody. Um, I'm not a licensed therapist. And so I literally had a client today. I was like, okay, I got it. Let me send you to a girlfriend who's a really incredible therapist. So for me, my healing consisted of therapy. It consisted of Reiki healing. It consisted of hypnosis, breath work, and a lot of journaling, a lot of shadow work, and really giving myself the capacity and the space to process through everything that I had been through and really sit with a lot of it, because I think a lot of times what happens, especially for people that are abused, um, there's a lot of disassociation from the environments that you were in. And there was definitely a time, even in the beginning of my podcast, where people would ask me these same questions and I couldn't keep it together. Like I was just like kind of walking myself back through those traumatic moments that I had experienced with him. And now I can talk about it very matter of fact because it doesn't hurt anymore. I'm not it is a part of my story, but it's not who I am. And I think too often we get stuck in those stories, those really stuck seasons, those really hard seasons, and those really uncomfortable and unhealthy relationships. And then we stay there, and then it just gets worse and worse. And then when we finally make it out, we don't even know what to do in the world. We don't know how to act. We don't know how to behave. Um, we don't know any of those things. And so we pick things that are not probably the healthiest, people that aren't the healthiest, because we're going back to some of those patterning.
And so how many years did it take for you to, you know, recover? Are you still recovering? Do you still feel like you're recovering now?
There's definitely still moments like in September, okay, no, in August, I took my daughter to Nashville to go see the Goo Goo Dolls, and the Goo Goo Dolls song "Iris" was my song with her father, and I've told this to clients over the years, but one of the things that has been such a key for me to releasing any residual fear, anxiety, emotion, grief, whatever those things are kind of residual in my body from the things that I've gone through, is one of the things that I've done is really go to the places or go to the spaces that were the hardest for me. And one was to go back to the house that I was initially abused in Georgia. Um, in a really whole place, in a successful marriage, in a happy marriage with a beautiful son, with a beautiful home, with a wonderful business. Like I went back and saw what it used to look like for me. And that was really healing for me. And then when we were there in Nashville in August, I got to listen to that song. And it was probably one of the first times that it didn't bring up any residual emotions, because it just, I'm okay with it now. And I think too often we shy away from those environments, those songs, those places, those people that have a part of those really painful parts of our story. But I think laughing, smiling, and healing and being happy in those environments and in those spaces that used to be really hard for you, for me, has been a really big key for me to release anything that's residual left from who I used to be and what I have gone through.
But do you think like your work is helping to heal you too as you help others heal? You feel like it's helping you to heal to some extent too?
Oh, absolutely. I think, and there's so many, I think, and a lot of coaches that I work with, and a lot of friends that I have that are in the industry, so often something that will happen with a client will spark something, a memory, an aha kind of a thing for them as well. And I do, there's times where I heal right alongside my clients. And sometimes I'm only 2, 3, 4 steps ahead of some of the women that I work with, and then they catch up, and then we become, then we're on the same page, and we are more of a colleague versus a client and a coach. And so those are my favorite, when they heal to the point that they step into their power, and then getting to watch that, getting to be present for that. But I've definitely healed via my clients as well. I can definitely say that for sure.
Well, you do a lot with childhood trauma. Did you have trauma in your own childhood?
I did, and I think part of it was not understanding the environment that I grew up in. Some of it makes sense to me now. Some of it I'm still kind of unpacking, even just from a visit in December. I'm adopted, so I was raised by a really wonderful family. I have a brother who was adopted as well from a different birth mother and father. Um, but we had such an interesting dynamic in our family, and I definitely didn't ever feel like I was the most important. Like I didn't feel like I was much of a priority. And so, it's one of those things where you're the kid that does it feels ignored, then you do naughty stuff to get attention. You act out, you get in fights in school, you ditch class, you don't get your grades up, all these different components. And we had some things that went on within my family as well that changed my view on a lot of different things. And I wasn't in an environment where we really ever talked about it. And so, one, it was understanding who I was, because part of being adopted, and uh, I have a girlfriend that's adopted as well. And there's a not really knowing who you are component that I can't explain to anybody who isn't adopted. It's one of those things. It's like, I would go to friends' houses and see pictures of them with their family on the wall and think, oh my gosh, you can see you have your mom's eyes, or you have your mom's smile, or you look just like your dad. And I would see all these things growing up, but I couldn't see that in my own immediate environment. So I couldn't look around me and go, oh, that's why I'm like that, or that's why I do this. I felt kind of like the black sheep my whole life. And so as a result, creating community for other people has really always been something that I gravitated to. And it really is because that's what I needed myself. And one of my coaches said years ago, she's like, we teach what we most need to learn. And so much of what I needed to learn was that I was worthy enough just as I was. And at 21, I met my birth mom. I also learned that my birth father committed suicide when I was 10. And so I never, of course, got to meet him because I didn't meet her till 21. But um, I think it's a really beautiful gift when you are an adoptee and you get to actually meet the family where you came from, because one, it doesn't always happen that way. And two, even if it does happen, sometimes it's not really happy. And my birth mom and I are very close. She's one of my favorite people. She's actually flying out here to spend my 45th birthday with me. And I got to spend time with my birth grandpa when I was in back home in New Mexico for Christmas. And so for me, healing looks like spending time and leaning into those people, like my birth family, and really getting to understand who I am even more and where I come from, and some of the lineage pieces that everybody else gets to know right off the bat. And so that's been actually really, really fun for me.
Well, I think like from a lot of people I've seen who are adopted, they kind of um, you have that issue where you feel abandoned because your birth parents gave you away, so sometimes they might feel abandoned, and then it makes
Mhm.
it more difficult to attach to others. Do you kind of see that in yourself and others?
Yeah, there was an episode. So I don't know if you read anything Brene Brown, but I've been a huge fan of hers pretty much since she appeared in life. And she has a book called Braving the Wilderness. And I have had that book for a very long time. And just about a year and a half ago, I read that book. And it was really about belonging. And there was probably 4 pages into the book, I was just in a puddle of tears immediately, because it was understanding that we create in our environment the things that we don't have currently. So for me, I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere, and so I created a community for women to know that you belong just as you are, and you don't have to comb your hair today to be beautiful, and you don't have to put on makeup to be worthy. And just because you're in a size 12 jeans doesn't mean you're any less worthy of love. And so much of what I've understand about myself now has come from books that I've read, coaches, of course, but really being honest with myself about who I am, and learning who some of those backstory pieces for me, from my family, from my lineage, has helped that as well.
Hmm. So before we close, what would you tell someone that has had childhood trauma or that has had domestic violence? What kind of things would you tell them to help them heal?
One, I would say find a therapist that you can really lay your armor down, because I think too often people will go to therapy, and I will never not advocate for therapy. It is what saved my life. It is why I'm here. All the other things came so much later in my life. But I think that people will go, okay, well, these are the 3 therapists that I can afford based upon my insurance. And they'll go in, and none of them are the right fit. And I look at therapy and finding a therapist is like dating. Like, do I feel safe in this environment? Can I say and be honest 100% and really lay my armor down and be present in this with this person and feel like this is a safe space for me? And I tell clients, and I talk about it all the time, like, go and interview different people from a therapy perspective and find the right person. It's the same thing when it comes to a coach or a business or whatever that you're wanting the help from. Make sure that that's the right fit for you. And what I did for me when it got really bad when I was in postpartum was, like, it was by all means necessary. And so I went on a search for all the different ways to heal that I'd never even heard of. I didn't know what breath work was. I didn't know what Reiki was.
Mhm.
I didn't know any of this stuff. And I think we get so stuck in just what this traditional space looks like. And sometimes different modality that I have done, that I'm also certified in, and just that have utilized in my healing journey as well, unlocks a different piece. It helps a different component, and it becomes more tools for you to be able to show up in the world and not get triggered. Or if you get triggered, you can diffuse it really quickly and understand it and move past those moments. And I think if someone's listening that is either gone through domestic violence or has dealt with any sort of trauma, whether it's childhood abuse, any of those horrible things that I just, it breaks my heart that any of us have ever gone through any of those things. The biggest thing that you can do for yourself is really take the time and make the investment on the things that will actually move you forward. Because what I can tell you that I did is I didn't go to therapy, and I bought clothes all the time. And I was like, I feel pretty when I'm out, so it's fine. And then when I get home, I would crawl into a bottle of wine, and then I would cry myself to sleep. And that is only you're gonna spiral at some point. And so if someone is listening, I would say, one, find a therapist that you feel like is a safe space for you. Two, go searching for modalities that you feel like might just be a new avenue to look for, whether it's breath work, hypnosis, Reiki, whatever those look like, tapping. There's so many different ways to heal and to release the trauma that's stuck in your body. When you make a decision that you're like, by all means necessary, I'm going to get past this stuff because I want to just feel better. Once you surrender to that thought process, you're going to start finding those places and make those investments, so that, because of all the things that you can do for yourself, getting all the inside pieces right, that's the most important investment.
And so, where can people find your podcast? You said Apple. Is it on
Mhm.
YouTube and some
It's
other
not on YouTube.
places?
We're actually getting ready to put
And
it
what
on
is the name of your
YouTube.
podcast?
Resilient Heart
Oh,
Podcast. You will know it's me because I have a big poofy
okay.
pink skirt. There's another Resilient Heart podcast. Mine is me and in a very big pink, hot pink tulle. It's just a vibe. That's my favorite color. It's on everything on my branding. Um, and it's just me being extra because that's what I do.
Mhm. And can people reach out to you personally, or do you take any
Absolutely.
contact?
Absolutely. So I'm on my Instagram stories, and I'm in Facebook a lot. But my name is the same everywhere, every platform. It's just Gabi, Gabi Garland, everywhere. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, all the same. And for me, you know, I'm one of those people, like, even if you message me and you think maybe I want to work with her, and I'm like, I don't know that I'm the right fit for you, I'm gonna help you find who's gonna be able to help you, because this work is so important and it's so sacred. And there's no ego for me when it comes to this. I want people to be happy and healthy and live the beautiful life that they're meant to live. And if I'm not the right coach for you, I'm going to say that. I want you to get what you need. And if I feel like I can't, if it's I told my husband today, I was like, today's client was above my pay grade, and I sent her to a therapist. And she'll probably come back to me and do some other Reiki and hypnosis, some different things, but I knew today she needed somebody else. And I'll never shy away from that, because I want people to really dig in deep and get this work done. Because um, feeling really good in your skin on a daily basis, no matter what the body that you wake up in, um, is freaking priceless. It's priceless.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on today. It was a pleasure to have you.
No, thank you very much.
I spent several years of my life stressed, anxious, and depressed. I needed to find something that would make my life work. For me, that was meditation. With meditation, I found the peace of mind that I was looking for. I found the happiness, and I found a way to improve every area of my life, my emotional life, my spiritual life, my relationships. I was able to discover things about myself. I can give you the tools to meditate. I will walk you through the process and hold your hand. Whether you're a beginner to meditation who's never meditated, or whether you're someone who's tried meditation and it just never seemed to work, we can make it work. Meditation is something that everyone can do, and I can show you how. Check out my course on meditation.